Hello everyone. On behalf of Vivian, Dave, and myself, Anthony, I'd like to welcome you to our Module 9 presentation on creating a successful learning environment for those with giftedness and behavior exceptionalities. Quick quote for you. Because of their talents, they don't need help. That is utter nonsense. The gifted need support as much as any other exceptional group, says Paul T., a teacher of students who are gifted. What are the characteristics of giftedness as an exceptionality? What is giftedness? Well, sometimes defined as an unusually advanced degree of general intellectual ability that requires differentiated learning experience of a depth and breadth beyond those normally provided in the regular school program to satisfy the level of educational potential indicated. Perhaps it is best to define giftedness in terms of fluid overlapping concepts. This is an idea that J.S. Rizzulli had with his enrichment model in 1977. What he saw is these characteristics interacting to achieve a particular purpose. What interactions, you ask? Well, an interaction between above average ability, or a high level of ability, a high amount of task commitment, and a high degree of creativity. However, not all three would be in equal measures. So these lines on the diagram in front of you would change. He said that gifted students are capable of developing this composite set of traits and applying them to any area of human performance in a fluid way, adapting to the task. This gained rapid acceptance from many educators, and he refined his model in 1985, 1997, and 2014. Since emphasizing specific performance over general ability, it encouraged educators to create opportunities for all students to develop their talents and develop activities that appeal to their interest and expression. It is sometimes called the SEM, or the School-Wide Enrichment Model. And if you look in the notes, you'll see a link to their website. So what are the characteristics of gifted students? Well, according to our research, some may be gifted in different areas, more advanced, for instance, in math and languages. Gifted students tend to have a high level of language development and vocabulary, have a keen memory, a large knowledge base, and varied interests, and be good at problem solving and strong observation skills, and have an ability to understand and apply concepts. They're also very creative and imaginative. Students who are identified as gifted are usually done so in reference to their potential for learning, for success in general. Gifted students might be bored with routine tasks, want to do things their way and question authority, sometimes be perfectionists, resulting in heightened anxiety, get frustrated with meeting their potential, and not feel truly gifted, in quotations. Gifted students have social and emotional needs and behavioral concerns just like any other student. So what's the identification process for giftedness in the school system? Well, first, students who may be defined as gifted are often recommended by teachers or parents based on observations. Then there's some testing. Here's one that's called the Weichler test. 4 is sometimes used to determine a score. Lastly, the students obtain aptitude scores, those scoring in the very superior range using a psychoeducational assessment or above the 97th percentile using the Canadian Cognitive Abilities Test might be classified as giftedness. The results are then put together through an identification, placement, and review committee, which parents and schools can agree on. One thing they may not agree on is whether or not what is defined as gifted is sometimes changing from board to board. Giftedness is the largest group of students receiving fully self-contained special education services in an elementary, although significantly fewer are in self-contained classes in secondary. Some students are at risk of being under-identified, including young boys, adolescent girls, minority groups, and students with disabilities. Because testing is often based on suggestion from parents or teachers, other factors like behavior, other concerns, might result in testing being missed. Some people have said that problem solving might be a better indicator, and there's definitely lots of room for discussion in this idea of the identification process. So there's two forms of formal identification processes. The first one is an external psychoeducal report. And the way that works is that there's a board office for verification. Once they're verified, then it goes to the department head, and whether that department head is homeschooled or special ed or enhanced learning, they take it from there. Or if there's an internal psychoeducational report, it starts with the department head inside a school of those various programs or an institution or at home. There's a report issued, and then the student is formally identified as gifted through this process. Again, it may change from board to board. Another situation for students is that there are some that are twice exceptional or dual identified. And what that means is that they are gifted, but they are also formally identified as having a learning disability as well, ASD or another spectrum disorder, or a behavior identification of another kind. Their learning disabilities may hide their giftedness or their giftedness may hide their learning disabilities. So the situation is complex. What are the implications for learning? Well, another quote for you. Studies show that the most effective teachers of gifted students have high intellectual, cultural, and literary interests, are high achieving and hold high standards of excellence, are flexible and democratic in dealing with students, use innovative, experimental, facilitative, problem-solving approaches, respect students' creativity, and do not view critical thinking, non-conformity, or criticism of authority as discipline problems. Gifted students tend to excel in programs that put them with like-minded peers, are challenging, focus on critical thinking and problem solving, encourage risk-taking, allow for differentiated instruction to encourage creativity and abstract thinking. What are the accommodations for a gifted program? Well, first there's acceleration, where students are given curriculum from later years. For instance, doing math, grade 10 math and grade 9, becoming less frequently used due to concerns over socialization and other issues. Another accommodation is sophistication, a strategy where the students approach the curriculum in a way that is more in-depth and examines the underlying concepts behind and the applications of the curriculum. For instance, they may examine the background behind a scientific concept or apply a mathematical theory in a practical setting. Novelty. Students are given a chance to approach curriculum in unusual and creative ways, self-directed or design projects to show curricular understanding. And finally, enrichment. Students are given additional resources to complete alternative assignments, encouraging advanced or critical thinking and project design. For example, examining literary concepts in a language class through more varied media. Boards and schools might also use a variety of strategies or mixed strategies depending on student need, age, grade level, resources available, and number of students in a local program. However, gifted students should be assessed at the same level as the peers in their standard curriculum. It should be appropriate work, but not more work. Gifted students may end up completing more work, but it should not be because they have been given additional tasks that their peers do not have to do. It should foster risk-taking and build self-directed learning opportunities, should encourage students working within areas of passion for them. Bloom, for instance, observed that high-level talent development is nurtured through exposure to progressively more complex tasks in a pre-structured continuum of learning experience based upon mastery and readiness. All in all, a teacher has to be versatile in differentiating instruction and situations for students. Here are some teaching strategies on how to challenge gifted learners from Amy Azan. First, evaluate their understanding of the curriculum, then attempt harder concepts. Be willing to adapt learning to a variety of levels for students. Offer lots of choice to demonstrate learning. Create opportunities in assessment that allow them to demonstrate their passions. Allow gifted learners to collaborate. And finally, as an educator, plan for the top range learner and then differentiate for all. So what should be your assessment methods for gifted students? Well, they should have the same expectations and should be evaluated at the same level as their academic level peers. Don't worry if your class average is very high. Feedback. Gifted students need regular feedback to keep them on the right track and chart their progress, especially if they're working with their own ideas beyond the curriculum. Enhancement. Any work that goes beyond the curriculum or beyond the expectation of their peers should be assessed, but not affect their grade. When we're thinking about assessment, obviously the triangulation of data is very important when assessing any students, but is especially useful for students with exceptionalities. Conversation, informal or informal conferences, sharing and exchange of ideas, analysis and explanation of ideas, participation in activities and discussions are all part of the conversation. Observation. Well, we need a demonstration of learning or understanding of skills. Can be group work or informal or formal group work. And finally, process work, where you're looking at them making drafts or revising. Finally, with the production or their products. Assessments, presentations, completed work, independent or collaborative are very important. Feedback-based assessment, meaning those without grading, helps teachers gain a more individualized rapport with students and a better understanding of their particular needs. Hey, you're considering changing assessment in your class? Yeah, you might want to change things up and consider these alternatives, or even throw the marks away altogether. You might consider coming up with a single point rubric for assignments instead of giving a wordy or multi-level rubric. You might consider using student-friendly language, and a really powerful one is to have the students co-create the rubric with you. You might consider no testing. Why would you put students through a stress-filled situations? You might have a class discussion, a mini group discussion. Can you ascertain their knowledge through other means? Finally, delayed marks. Don't give back the rubric right away. Force the students to read over some feedback or written ideas that you've given them, and then see if they can submit that back to you as part of their learning or their final project. And then give them the rubric and then see if they met the criteria. And then finally, go back to basics. Have students practice and learn skills without assessment. Make learning fun. If a student throws out an idea, make it into an activity so they have a vested interest. Here's a quick how-to video from Dave. Working with secondary school students with behavioral exceptionalities causes each day, each moment to be an unplanned experience. Janessa D, a secondary school behavior resource teacher. I agree with you, Janessa. I think that we have to see this as a positive. No 2 days are the same. Hey, looking for more resources? These next couple of slides will show you some resources that you can use to learn more about gifted learning. Now, let's look at the characteristics of behavior exceptionality in a little more detail. What's a definition of behavior exceptionality? Well, it's a learning disorder characterized by specific behavior problems over a period of time, to such a marked degree and of such a nature as to adversely affect the educational performance that may be accompanied by an inability to maintain or build interpersonal relationships, excessive fears or anxieties, a tendency to compulsive reaction, an inability to learn that cannot be traced to intellectual, sensory, or other health factors, or any combination thereof. Types of behavior exceptionalities. Well, the most common types of behavior exceptionalities include attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, OSD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, FASD, and finally, oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD. Here are some of the steps in the identification and review process. You've got to consider the information, look at the IEP, make sure that you are working with the committee, make sure that the parents are involved in the process, and this is an example of some of the process involved. Okay, let's look at attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's a behavior exceptionality caused by a neurological disorder. It is the student's inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity which prevent them from learning. Characteristics include fidgety, have difficulty waiting their turn, need to talk excessively, difficulty participating in leisure activities quietly, unable to stay. Here are some strategies: structured prompts, cues, visual and external, guidance and explicit instruction through instruction and independence work, encourage self-monitoring during independence work, guided and shared reading to assist with reading difficulties, oral and verbal teaching strategies and assessments to help with written expression problems, concrete and visual instruction for numeracy, small group study and support to encourage work completion, behavior contracts and positive reinforcement, use of assignment checklists and agenda to encourage task completion, flexible instruction strategies to maintain attention. And here's a resource that you can access through our slides, more detail. Obsessive compulsive disorder. Obsessive compulsive disorder is characterized by recurrent and persistent obsessions and compulsions that interfere with everyday life and prevent learning. It should be of note that obsessions are involuntary and the compulsions are repeated behavior that are done in response to the student's obsessions. Possible behaviors include washers, double checkers, doubters and sinners, counters and arrangers, and hoarders. And more detail about that is. So what are some educational strategies for those with OCD? Well, they need they benefit from a highly structured classroom with clear expectations, elimination of unnecessary materials and declutter, giving the student a clean and organized environment, checklists and organizers help students stay organized, extra time for assignments and assessment. Also consider the time of day when administering assessments and spacing out assessment over days. Give the student time to complete compulsions or take breaks when necessary, being sure not to point out behavior and have a quiet, calm, and safe space for a student if behaviors escalate. Gives direct instructions with clear and consistent transitions. Maintain a positive and inclusive atmosphere where positive behavior is rewarded. And of course, there's a guide if you want some more information. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is a neurodevelopmental disorder related to alcohol consumption during pregnancy. Characteristics include physically distinct features, easily distracted, frustrated, and poor attention span, poor fine and gross motor skills linked with growth impairments, difficulties with academics due to poor organizational skills, problems with concrete thinking, trouble with time and money concepts, social inappropriateness due to poor impulse control, and finally, behavioral issues arising from difficulties with remorse, concepts of right and wrong, impulse control, and judgment. And there is a link, of course, for you to find out more information. Here are some strategies. Close proximity to the teacher in front of the classroom seating will help with focus. Reduce visual and auditory distraction within the classroom. Allow student to have short breaks when necessary. Provide extra time for processing. Consider using visual and verbal clues to reinforce schedules, structures, and transitions. Structured routines and consistent classroom organization. Structured transitions with consistent warnings of transitions. Individuals focused and instruction when possible. Hands-on learning and use of manipulatives will help with abstract concepts, and employ assistive technologies such as interactive software when completing written assignments. Reward positive behavior through an encouraging environment using praise or incentives, but avoid punishments as students react poorly to negative responses. And there's a special needs guide. So what about oppositional defiant disorder? Well, oppositional defiant disorder is a behavioral disorder where students' severe behaviors affect their daily lives because they're easily annoyed and repeatedly lose their temper. When they lose their temper, they argue with adults, refuse to comply with rules and directions, and blame others for their mistakes. Behaviors associated with OCD are stubbornness and testing limits, manipulative and purposely annoying and angering other students, angry, spiteful, vindictive, and resentful with temper tantrums, may speak unkindly and seek revenge or retaliation with others. And of course, there's an educational guide to help with this. So here are some strategies for ODD. Consult the student in the co-creation of a behavioral plan. Involve the class when developing classroom rules and establishing accepted classroom environmental norms or dynamics. Establish clear and consistent rules with daily schedules so students know what to expect in class. Maintain calm and organized behaviors as the instructor, and be specific in teaching social skills, anger management, and conflict resolutions. Give the student 2 choices and options to choose from. Avoid criticism and punishment, but provide immediate positive reinforcements when possible. Give individualized and paced instruction in chunked or structured tasks to avoid frustration and minimize free time for off-task behavior. Modify or shorten tasks. Take advantage of assisted technology. Involve student, parents, instructional assistants, and administration. And there's some more information. Here are some more resources to help you with behavior exceptionality. So thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to our discussion online. And on behalf of Dave and Vivian and myself, Anthony, we'd like to thank you and hope that this was a helpful slideshow and you were able to learn some things. Thank you.